when I'm talking about the dog has learned and understands a command, my standard of that would be that the dog does that command consistently, no matter what the distractions are around the dog, no matter anything else, any other factors, the dog does the command. The dog has a complete and total understanding of the command and will do the command consistently and correctly. The first phase of training is the teaching phase. The second phase is called the training phase, and the third phase is called the proofing phase. So let me go through those just really briefly. The teaching phase is when you're going to be showing the dog exactly what you'd like him to do. And that's through the use of coaxing the dog into the position that you'd like him, or compelling the dog into the position that you need him to be in. For example, pushing the dog into the sit command, or doing right and left about turns to get the dog into the heel position. Those are examples of teaching the dog a particular posture.
Mm-hmm.
The second phase is the training phase. And in the training phase, that's where we go into the repetitions. We go into the repetitions in the training phase. By repeating the commands over and over again, we get the dog to have a deep and broad understanding of what it is
mm-hmm.
that we're teaching him.
Right.
The third phase is the proofing phase. And in the proofing phase, you make it more difficult for the dog to do the command. In other words, to a certain degree in the training phase, when you change locations or you put distractions in the environment, that is beginning the proofing phase. They sort of seamlessly go one into the other. You're coaxing the dog into the sit position, for example. Pushing the dog, you're coaxing the dog into the sit position. That's still the teaching phase until the repetitions get to the point where the dog is starting to do it on his own and you're starting to have to use less and less coaxing to get the dog into the position. And now you're into the training phase.
Mm-hmm.
As you progress through the training phase, you start to move the dog into environments that might have more distractions, or maybe you have your housekeeper doing it, or maybe you're doing it around another dog. And that seamlessly now has gone from the training phase into the proofing phase. And proofing, I think they get it from bomb-proofing the dog. That means the dog will do the command no matter what, even if bombs are going off around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So those are the three phases of training. What happens is a lot of people, they miss one of those parts, or they shorten one of the phases of training.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they go from the teaching phase, perhaps they haven't coaxed the dog or compelled the dog into the position enough. And when they start doing repetitions, they're doing repetitions in the training phase. They're actually doing it on top of a misunderstanding or an incomplete understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dog is being trained with this confusion, and they're now repeating the confusion over and over again to the dog.
Right.
An example of not training the dog enough is that perhaps you didn't do enough repetitions with the dog. And so when you take the dog out into an area where there's more distractions in the proofing phase,
mm-hmm.
the training falls apart. The dog stops doing the command.
Right. Maybe you did it 300 times in the same place at the same time, and then you went somewhere else. You thought, oh, my dog does it. It does it every time. When I'm here at home on this one square of concrete, I ask my dog to sit, sits. I go to impress my friends. I ask my dog to sit. We're in a restaurant. Nothing else changed. My dog doesn't sit. Why?
Because of the training phase. So that would be, that particular example is an example of the training to proofing phase. So the dog didn't get enough of the training in order to move off to an area where there's more distractions.
It's normally how it goes down, right?
It could be, but it also could be a problem in the teaching phase where the dog was misunderstanding what it was that you were teaching.
Mm-hmm.
In the last episode, we talked about repetitions, but one other important factor of repetitions is the process of elimination for the dog. So the process of elimination is super important because the dog has to identify exactly what parts of what you're doing is important and what parts are irrelevant. Like, for example, if you train the dog to sit in the morning in your backyard, the dog understands the exercise of sitting, and he'll be very consistent with sitting in your backyard in the morning. But there isn't enough data input for the dog to realize that the backyard isn't part of the training.
Right.
That morning time isn't part of the training. But by taking the dog into the front yard and teaching the dog to sit there, backyard becomes irrelevant.
Right.
So by the process of elimination, the dog eliminates location as a factor in the training.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot eliminate without enough data input. The three phases of training, basically what they are is a way for you to provide data to the dog. You've got to provide him enough information, enough data, so that the dog doesn't accidentally think that sitting means sitting in the backyard in the morning. So by providing the dog with more data, the dog goes, oh, okay, well, sit means sit in the front yard and the backyard. Oh, I gotcha. So he's eliminated that. So you want to make sure that you taught the dog in a wide variety of areas so that the dog doesn't accidentally associate the wrong things with the training. You've got the teaching phase, you've got the training phase, and you've got the proofing phase. If the dog is failing at proofing, in other words, if the dog is failing to do the commands under distractions, then you have to go back to the training phase and continue training. If the dog is having a lot of problems in the training phase, in other words, you're having to compel the dog into for example, the sit position over and over again, and it's not getting any easier, then you've probably missed out on something in the teaching phase. So you always go back one step and consider that, okay, the last step is probably there's a confusion or a problem, or I haven't done enough repetitions.
Right.
The dog is only operating on the data that you provide.
I think it's always important to make sure that first stage, the foundation, is the strongest.